Bank Shepard now joining us on the Campbell Clinic hotline, also in your YouTube screen right now. Good to see you, bud. Wake Forest stuff behind you. I feel like last time we talked, you had Tulane stuff behind you. Ole Miss alum, now running sports properties for Wake Forest with Learfield. A lot of stuff to get to, but obviously when we saw the schedule come out, you knew you were at Wake Forest, saw Ole Miss coming to Winston-Salem here for this 2024 season. I guess just I would assume you got blew up tickets, calls, what to do, what to don't. It's kind of in some ways it's sort of your Super Bowl this week, bud.
It is to a certain degree. Thank you for having me on, Chase. Really appreciate it. We're excited to have Ole Miss come to town. You know, being an alum, it's certainly unique, and it's going to be a great matchup. You and I think we're in undergrad around the same time when we did have the home and home in 2006 and 2008. And had some interesting outcomes from those games. So looking forward to seeing the third iteration of this matchup. And obviously want to talk more about what's going on at Wake and what's going on here in Winston-Salem. And I think anyone visiting from out of town, whether they live in North Carolina and they're an Ole Miss alum or they're coming to our state for the first time, they're going to be really pleasantly surprised with their experience here. So excited to have that happen.
Between your other employments, your educations, you've been in a lot of really good game day environments. You've been at places that really cared about sports and about football. What has surprised you in a good way about the Wake game day? I mean, you get to Wake Forest, and what's it sort of been like just getting ingrained in their culture up there?
Yeah, it's got its own experience. The first thing that sticks out to me from a football perspective is just the ease of going to the game. So I think a lot of the fans coming in will enjoy the fact that we're 3 miles north of downtown Winston-Salem, right off the interstate. You can park in your parking spot, depending on where you are. Probably walk to your seat from your parking spot in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, really?
And it's a very efficient experience going in. Everyone's really friendly. The game itself, the environment, the stadium, it's not a bad seat in the house at a Legacy Stadium. So it's a really neat facility, despite it not being the biggest in the ACC or in the Power Four. Every seat, every vantage point is really nice, and all the amenities around that are high level as well. So I think most fans coming in will enjoy that. Obviously, the weather in North Carolina in September is a little bit more doable compared to maybe Mississippi in the same way. But yeah, I think overall it's a great experience, and people are going to enjoy it.
So from a tailgating restaurant standpoint, people just there for the fact of game day on Saturday. What's sort of the district, the area, the restaurants? I mean, give me a little bit of a tour guide situation for game day in Winston-Salem.
So Wake Forest is similar, not necessarily just like South Carolina, where their stadium is not necessarily on the main campus. It's adjacent. So they have like an athletics campus here. This is just east of the main campus of Wake Forest. So you'll notice when you park, you're right next to our Coliseum. Our baseball stadium backs up right to it. So it's all in one big, massive plot right there. So that environment really lends itself to parking and tailgating in your spot that way. We have parking lots surrounding a Legacy Stadium that people can walk around and interact with other tailgates like that versus, say, a Grove set up where there's a plot of land where everyone goes to. So that's interesting. And then, people do maybe partake in a few beers downtown at one of our breweries or bars nearby, or go to Putters, which is a Winston-Salem and Wake Forest staple that people talk about. So go hit that up. But overall, it's a really cool kind of ease into the day, right? So you start maybe early, mid-afternoon and the tailgate for a few hours and walk in and watch the game.
You got a favorite brewery?
I do. I mean, mine locally, of course, is our partner Fiddle and Fish. So they have our IPA, Roll the Quad IPA that supports our NIL initiatives here. So I got to give them a shout out here too. But we have a few. Wiseman is great. Incendiary is great too. Incendiary is actually, I think, if I know this correctly, it's part of the old RJ Reynolds tobacco plant. They refurbished that area and remade it into a brewery and some other mixed-use development. So it's kind of cool to have some different options right here in downtown Winston-Salem. We have some other local craft breweries as well scattered throughout. So if you're coming to town, you have some options.
What's sort of been just the mood around the place with Ole Miss coming in? I mean, SEC school in general, but top 5 team. I mean, we kind of ask this of SEC schools all the time because we got Oklahoma and Texas now and that whole deal. But just from a Wake standpoint, has this been something that people have been looking forward to for a while?
Yeah, it's really stood out. Starting in the spring when you talk to your corporate partners, start thinking about the next season, and you explain, hey, by the way, we're hosting teams like Clemson. We have a big opening night against a local team like an NC A&T. But when you say Ole Miss, it's really piqued people's interest, not only because, oh, well, that's a different type of team, but I mean, the word is out. They're a top 5 program right now. So give Lane Kiffin and the team credit for what they're building, and that's really stood out. And there's some energy around this game because of that. So gotten a lot of phone calls locally about, hey, I didn't realize Ole Miss is coming to town. Would love to go to the game, or hey, how can we activate around that too? So it's been neat, and I think it's going to be a really energized Legacy Stadium Saturday because of that energy around it.
How much you still keeping up with the Rebels?
Quite a bit, yeah. I mean, obviously growing up in Jackson and being alum, and despite working at other schools, you always have your team you grew up with. Sure. I do keep track of them a little bit, watch your phone on scores and whatnot. But as everyone knows, you got to cheer for the paychecks. So excited about kind of having the Rebs come to town, but also see Wake Forest compete as well.
So explain, I mean, I could do it, and I probably will do it a little bit in an intro before we actually start talking, but what is it that you do, and kind of explain your role on a day-to-day there at Wake?
Yeah, so in summation, my team manages the corporate partnerships for Wake Forest Athletics on behalf of a company called Learfield, who has the multimedia rights at Wake Forest and many other schools around the country, including Ole Miss. So y'all know Chris Helsel, Brandon Hudspeth, and the team there. They manage that in Oxford. We do that here in Winston-Salem with a dedicated team. And we work with brands like a Legacy, who has the stadium name on our stadium, to many other brands you might notice if you're at the game or listen to our radio broadcast. So we manage everything from the radio network broadcast. So in an Ole Miss sense, that's David Kellum. We have Stan Cotton here. You combine that with some other on-site activation and other marketing solutions like in-venue signage. So we're the ones making the timeouts last long at times at the games and try to keep you entertained at times as well, and try to generate revenue on behalf of Wake Athletics. And it's a unique time to do what we do. I don't think, to your point, everyone knows and understands corporate partnerships if you're a college sports fan. But if you're watching College Game Day on a Saturday, you might notice certain companies have mascots or school logos in those particular commercials or segments. That's done through my company, Learfield. So it's been neat to kind of see revenue being such a focus around the country now, and how in the past it probably was more focused on a donor or individual that led to that. Now it's corporate involvement and how they can be involved with NIL, but just in general, more solutions are opening up in our space in college because of the need to find revenue sources in ways we didn't before.
I'm sure there's similarities in any profession when you move to a new school, a new job, a new area, those kind of things. But when you are looking at opportunities that come about and you're going, okay, Wake's open, let's apply for this, or however that happened. I mean, I don't know exactly how you got the college job, but you were at Tulane, you end up at Wake. I mean, are you looking for like certain things? I mean, how do you go about sort of ingraining in the community and getting established? Because, I mean, sales in some ways is a lot like journalism. And if I took a job, I've got to figure out sources. I got to figure out ways for people to trust me. I got to figure out all these different things. And I think you do have a version of that. So when you take a position, what are you looking for? And then what's sort of that first 100 days to sort of become that person for a new place?
Yeah, it's very similar. Y'all have covered coaching searches, how someone's path went from GA to a head coach position or an administrator. I know you've had some interviews like that too. We're very similar. You know, to move up, you have to move out a little bit and have to be a little bit of a chameleon, depending on the market you serve and how that needs to be addressed. But for me, it's all about upside of that property. You know, I've worked at schools like LSU, the big state school that does have a lot of buzz from a corporate partnership perspective, but also went from LSU to Baylor, where I saw in a similar way the opportunity was at the time 2014 evolving into kind of a national conversation, a new stadium, those things that maybe brought some new intrigue to that particular school brand that I could leverage in that role from a sales position. So everyone's unique and different. You have to adjust based on that. I've been at Tulane, to your point, where it was a smaller school and kind of surrounded by pro and college competition. I've been in places like UNC where you're literally in the same market with two other ACC schools, and you have to compete against them to secure the revenue you're going after. So everything's unique and different, but overall, it's just really neat to be a part of college sports, whether you're in the journalism side or doing what I do. And it's kind of full circle to think about. I started in journalism, actually wrote for rebelsports.net in college days, go full circle now, kind of being the other side of that, it's been fun to see different perspectives on what that looks like, whether it was at Ole Miss, as we all did in Mississippi, only knowing that, to getting some perspective about 15 years later.
So what happened to go from journalism to the
Yeah,
business side? I mean, yeah, because like I said, you and I met through the journalism side, and
we
you're
did.
doing marketing communications and things like that. But how do you? I guess at what point did you go? Nope, I'm not going to put the. I'm going to put the pen down. I'm going to put the computer down in that capacity. And was it geared towards something like what you're doing right now when that decision was made?
It was. So I think when I was covering Ole Miss basketball at the time, it was Andy Kennedy's first year. So I'm a sophomore in college and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I thought sports journalism would be the path, but you start to observe in that role and realize, oh, I didn't realize there's someone who does that behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And, also I think too, if you look back, we think it's always been this way. College sports has evolved so much administratively, what the focuses are, from the in-game fan experience to corporate partnerships to development. There's so many new components that have developed since 2005, 2006. So I was just able to maybe identify and notice that, hey, I think my skill set and abilities might be better served this way. I'm good with the written word, sure, but maybe it's better served, incorporating some other skills I have to bring it to life. But it wasn't anything against sports journalism. I just thought, maybe that's kind of, instead of covering that, maybe I could try to be on the other side and be covered or be a part of what's being covered behind the scenes.
So I can go back into the admin and find some stuff you scribbled back in the day somewhere. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
I think, my cousin, who is married to Brett Basham, he might have an article or two in the drafts. Or I think what my first article is about Justin Sarasoli, if I remember correctly. Am I getting that name right?
So, wow. Okay.
Hall transfer that eventually didn't make it, but there's some throwbacks for sure. I do laugh. I'm like, I remember writing an article about Cody Satterwhite and Lance Lynn, and obviously they've gone on to do some big things. So it was cool to kind of cover that team with baseball, to what Andy Kennedy built, and even Coach O in the middle of his run there too. It was certainly a unique time at Ole Miss.
For what you're getting into, and I mean, obviously you want to move up, you want to have as much of a resume as you can, but deciding, I think Belmont, North Carolina, I mean, you get a lot more education, you leave Ole Miss, go get grad school and those type of things. Was that seen as a prerequisite for what you were trying to do, or was that about simply learning things that from a skill set standpoint? I mean, what kind of led to that level of education?
Yeah, it was a little bit of just at every point in the line of making that decision, just making the decision that was the right fit for me at the time. So going to grad school at Belmont, as you know, in the late 2000, the aughts, if you will, just realizing maybe I need to extend myself in school because of the lack of jobs available, but also noticing, hey, I'm noticing if I want to be in a role modeled by this person, they had a master's or they got certain experience that I was able to get at Belmont, interning at Vanderbilt, to then lead to a more full-time role after that at Ole Miss. So, in every example, it was like, hey, what can I do to better position myself to be at a stage maybe down the road that could benefit me, like anybody else's career or job aspirations. But in the college sports sense, especially if you're in revenue generation, it's probably good to know the holistic business environment combined with what's going on specifically in our sports space. And thankfully, between the education, the experience I've had, hopefully it can lead to some cool things down the road.
Nobody knows what's going to happen, and that goes for any conference. I'm not talking about the ACC or Wake or anything else, but do you get asked about just the conference realignments and the blows up and what happens down the road? I mean, how does that sort of factor into the day-to-day at a place like Wake and then also into your job specifically?
Honestly, it hasn't come up quite a bit.
Okay.
I know more the conversation at large has been interesting for college sports, right? Like just everything that's transpired the last 5 years has changed how people look at our space, right? And then you remember outside the NFL, it's the number one viewed sport in America. There's so much popularity surrounding college sports and what the transfer portal and NIL that we didn't experience even 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I just think it's an interesting time to be in our space, and everyone understands its development to maybe lead to some interesting results down the road in the near and long term. But right now, I think it's more intriguing than anything else for the observer to like, oh, tell me more about that. Or I've never really thought about college sports in that way before, but when I learned about what you do, it's fascinating. And yeah, I just think we don't even know what it's going to look like in 5 years, much less 20 years. So every day and every time we go to work, we're just trying to, my example with Wake, try to be the best version of what we are.
Dave Clawson's done a heck of a job, one of the better coaches in the conference and in the country. I guess, and you probably see this more as you're there even longer, but what's sort of the appreciation for him there, the job he's done, but also the loyalty and trying to make sure that you give him as much resources and ability as possible to make that even more of a long-term destination?
Coach Clawson's a great guy. Like, we've been around coaches who they think in one track as far as like, hey, I'm only a football coach. He's a holistic person. He is a very interesting guy to talk to. He cares about how he and his family embed themselves in the community. I've been here a short while and noticed that. I learned this talking to him. He was actually at one of the concerts for Talking Heads for the Stop Making Sense DVD. He was actually at one of those concerts. He was apparently he was on the opening tour for Duran Duran when he was in high school. So he cares about that stuff on top of everything else with football and the slow mesh and all the things he knows and he's really good at. So it's been kind of cool to be a part of just learning about him as a person through these interactions. But Coach Clawson's done a great job with this program, right? It's about building depth. It's about, using the resources you have to your advantage. And I think he's done that and maximized this place. And there's a lot to sell about Wake Forest. And I'm really excited about people from where I grew up coming out here and seeing that between the actual on-field product combined with our facility infrastructure, the amenities we have behind the scenes. We might not be the biggest school in the country, but I would put our facilities up there next to anybody else in the Power Four. I really would. And that translates to with Coach Forbes at basketball. He's a very interesting guy, but very down to earth and open to working with you. Coach Walt with baseball, similar deal. Just really good people here. It starts at the top with John Curry and all the way down.
I remember, I think I talked to Walter when he was at UNO for the first time because they came to Ole Miss for a series like way back in the day. And I'm pretty sure I either interviewed him that weekend or the week leading up. But I know in the back of my mind somewhere we've had some conversations about that at some point. Yeah, we've gotten this far without – you mentioned facilities and didn't even go to the pitching lab, Banks. I mean, the whole this thing that I have to answer about why Ole Miss doesn't have it basically every day all spring. So –
it's definitely one of the things we try to celebrate, and a lot of people maybe make light of that at times with our on-field performance, depending on the game. But yeah, it's really cool to have, again, the Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist Pitching Lab. I have to say that with the sponsor plug there, that comes in and brings in nationally, Cy Young level talent who come in to Winston-Salem to train here, right? Like we're really fortunate to have those kind of resources, and not many people would know that.
Can you, and maybe this is a question for somebody else, but to the best of your knowledge, can you explain why it's different than everywhere else? Because, technology is available in a lot of places, and I get that it's a medical. There is an association that helps take that extra step, but what do you think it is that makes that such the preeminent thing?
I wish I knew all the details of that, but what I can tell surface level, it was the first of its kind to think about it in that way. And then having the resources with a medically backed, staffed position specifically focused,
which is a big deal. That's a very important part of this process.
It's not just a coach coming in and say, I have this technology. It's combined with some other resources that I don't know if everyone else has. And maybe they're going to, of course, copycat that because it's been that successful and it's proven to be real. But I think ultimately it's just kind of one of those things that was first in its kind and it's got its reputation now based on that.
I know that this past season didn't necessarily go as expected, but you between Ole Miss and the places you had education and the places you worked, you've been a lot of baseball schools where it really, really mattered. What's sort of it been like there? They were preseason number one of the country last year. You had all these different things. Played for played in the final, whatever the year before. I get the semifinals. What's it been like from a baseball standpoint at a place that is pretty intimate and familial that Wake Forest is?
Yeah, many people might not know this. This stadium was actually originally our Winston-Salem Warthogs baseball team, the minor league baseball team that was here. They built a new baseball stadium off campus. Our AA team did. And then I believe it was maybe 15, 20 years ago, we actually settled into the stadium, which is right next to our baseball park. So I say all that because there wasn't really the tradition of Wake Forest baseball sustained. They had some runs in the NCAA tournament, but the culture of Wake Forest baseball, in the same way you think about LSU and Ole Miss and and some other schools around the country hadn't been really fostered and built. But arriving in 2023, the first week of opening week was when I got here. So I saw it and I was like, okay, I think I've heard some rumblings of getting Brent Louder and some other guys on our team that, okay, we might have a good shot this year to go from scattered crowds to that place being packed week by week, and then hosting a super regional and beating Alabama the way we did with so many home runs and kind of accommodating that Rake Forest, moniker that we ended up having that run we did. Just seeing it go from I believe there was something here to proof of concept was really neat. And now it's built a culture, and it's fun to kind of see, again, I went through as a fan growing up the Mike Bianco experience when he first started at Ole Miss, and kind of some intrigue that turned into a sustained baseball audience that turned into what we have today in Oxford. Very similar here. I think you're starting to see more people resonate with baseball, see proof of concept, and be like, yeah, it's a great experience to go to, but also we win, and we've got some really good guys I want to cheer for, and it's been a good dynamic. It's very similar to when I worked at Tulane here the last few years in 2020, and seeing the growth from, coming out of COVID and the team hadn't had that sustained run to now you're watching the Kansas State game on TV and that place was packed, and it's built a culture in New Orleans a little bit more that, it's not just LSU and the Saints. It really Tulane has its own kind of path. And I think Wake Forest baseball found its version of that here. So it's been fun.
What is kind of the pride point for you in that at Tulane? Because, they really have. In not only doing it, but then doing it and sustaining into another staff. I think that's like the catch for so many of the group of 5 teams or the smaller schools, that sometimes you can build it, but then, when the Willie Fritz of whatever your team is leaves, and it sort of falls down. But you make the big hire in Sumrall, you kind of become the rich man's, Arkansas State back in the day, when they kind of go from one good guy, they went through Malzahn and Freeze and all these guys and sort of sustained it in that capacity. And now, you're talking about legitimate, group of 5 playoff aspirations as a program. Maybe not this year, but just in general. You saw a good bit of that build. I would think that you watch that now and go, that's kind of what we envisioned. It just took a bit to get there.
Definitely. It's not just a quirky mascot, a fun logo, the cool color scheme, the uniforms. It really felt like there could be something there. It wasn't just a flash in the pan in 1998. They had Sean King and, Rich Rod and the run they had, right? Like, I felt in my heart when I first went there that there's a real opportunity at Tulane to build a football program that could be sustainable because of the resources around them, the talent that exists in the greater New Orleans region. And then, frankly, just they have resources there, being the type of school they are, that could, if they engage the right audience there, could lend itself to building a sustainable product in that level of football. And it was cool to kind of see that come to fruition. I think it says a lot about Tulane now that they're starting to realize, we said proof of concept a moment ago, just when they see their own team go to Dallas and win the Cotton Bowl over USC, they realize that, wow, we could do this. They hadn't had that proof that they could for a 25-year period, and they finally did. And I think now you're seeing investment from folks around New Orleans or around Tulane's community that maybe didn't think about football as that catalyst to drive the academic goals and mission of the school. And more recent, the modern era, you're seeing that now. And it's really cool to see from afar, and I'm cheering for them and wish them all the best down in New Orleans, because it was a cool experience and meeting a lot of great people in the process. So I hope that continues. And when I found out Coach Summerall was the hire, I was just like, okay, this thing could really take off. He could take it to the next level. But Coach Fritz did a great job and kind of held that belief. And a lot of people behind the scenes did a bunch of work to make that happen too. So I've got to give them credit.
You're obviously at a bigger job. I'm not making complete apples to apples with Tulane at all, but the creativity that was required there, is that something that did help from an experience wise that you can use at Wake, given just the size and scope in the ACC compared to some of the state schools?
Correct. You can take experiences no matter where you were, but I think there is some transferability in the fact that I am at Wake Forest in a state with so many other college sports brands that I'm competing against, much less, other opportunities for a company to align with from a marketing perspective. So that's been fun. I love the grassroots ambush marketing nature of what Tulane required me to do. So, down there I would grab some Tulane swag and just drop them off at Cooter Brown's and all the other bars around there and just be like, I got to show that there's a real energy around this brand. And it started to become, just kind of organically grow from there. And I think, Wake Forest thankfully already has that built in this city. And it's just more a matter of continuing to build on that foundation and growing it. I say Wake Forest around here and even nationally, it means something, which is really cool. And they think of Tim Duncan, Chris Paul, the more recent moments on the football field or baseball diamond, but yeah, it means something. So just kind of showing them, like this weekend with the football game we're going to have, to highlight and showcase all the great things we have going on. And, hopefully that builds from itself.
Is that a box score from when they beat Ole Miss, when Ole Miss scrimmage before the game, like up somewhere in the athletic department? You don't even have to throw a pass, and you go beat an SEC team on their home field? That hanging up somewhere around there?
I haven't seen anything like that. I guess they've updated some facilities in recent years. Reminds me that I'm old. There is a picture or two that kind of highlights Riley Skinner or things like that around here. Playing I was a senior in college when that happened. Makes me feel old in the process. But yeah, man, it's cool to kind of relive both that game on the other side now, but kind of a reminder of that era of Ole Miss athletics too, in that moment for sure.
So we mentioned restaurants and things, but just people are going to be on campus, and you said, you kind of can hang out where you park, you can do your tailgating, but whether it's in the pregame or just in general, what are a couple of just Wake Forest football game day things that Ole Miss people should partake or make sure they see or do?
Yeah. First of all, go to the campus. I'd highly recommend that. It's really, really impressive. It's put together similar to like a Duke, even at Ole Miss, where it's just a really cohesive look to it all, and it's a fun place to walk around and just check out. So highly recommend that. People might not know this, but Wake Forest originally was in Wake Forest, North Carolina. It was founded by the Baptist Convention, late 1800s, and then the R.J. Reynolds Foundation, the family, offered to basically say, we have a plot of land in Winston-Salem, move your school here. So we're actually on the plot of land donated by the Reynolds family, where Wake Forest exists today, and they moved it in the late 50s. So they built the football stadium in 68 and built around that, of course, ever since. But all that to say, there's some history here. There's some things you can go check out related to that family. People might not know, we're home to, obviously, Joe Camel and R.J. Reynolds, like I referenced, but Krispy Kreme was founded here, Texas Pete. There's a lot of staples, for good or for bad, that exist in Winston-Salem. So go check that out. Overall, it's just a really good place to live. If you're a golfer, you probably already made plans to go to a few of the spots. We've got Old Town, it's private, Bermuda Run, that you've talked about, I think, before on your show with one of our regionals here most recently. We got Oak Valley and Tanglewood that are available as well. And we're about an hour and a half away from Pinehurst and some other great spots in our state from that standpoint. So, it's a really cool situated place that, right nestled on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, near Charlotte, near Greensboro, obviously, in the Triangle. So, you can do a lot of cool stuff around your time just going to a football game.
I'm going to assume that would be a great trivia question, that Texas Pete was from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I don't know that many people would actually pull that one out of their hat. That was unknown to me.
College sports growing up, and you think, it's just this national brand. It's based right here. So we've got a lot of cool stories like that.
You are doing a great job picking out mascots at places. I mean, you got the Wave, the Demon Deacon's pretty cool. Like you're getting some stuff to work with from an apparel and like a mascot situation there, identity-wise, Banks.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun run. I've been fortunate to represent some really cool schools and kind of plug into what they had going on, whether it's Carolina Blue or, to your point, it's hard to beat the Tulane color combo for sure. And even when I was at Baylor, right, like we had some cool uniforms and things to leverage. Sometimes they were somewhat iffy, but for the most part, it was pretty good. So, yeah, man, it's been fun. I mean, again, like marketing and branding around college sports, it's just a really neat thing to call a job every day, and to leverage that and to do what I do, it's pretty neat.
Well, hey, I really appreciate it. Enjoy Saturday. I know it's cool for you. It'll be a good time. No matter what happens, you get Wake Forest, you get Ole Miss, hometown school back in town. So take advantage of that, and let's talk again.
Sounds great. Thanks, James. See you.